Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Eric Renner Brown. Eric is an editor and reporter at live music trade magazine Pollstar, where he has written cover stories about Billy Strings, Goose, Lockn, Trey Anastasio's Beacon Jams, and more. Last year, he produced Osiris Media's Alive Again, a 4-episode podcast about Trey Anastasio's career outside of Phish. Definitely recommend you check that out if you haven't already. His work has appeared in Entertainment Weekly, Rolling Stone, Vulture, Billboard, GQ, and People. Eric, you can say hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being on today. Really excited to talk some Phish with you. You've picked a great song that I've really been looking forward to discussing. So to start, why don't you just tell a little bit about how you got into Phish, and then after that, why you picked the song that you did.
Yeah, so I am a relatively recent Phish adopter. I'm a huge Deadhead and have been for a while. I got it from my dad, passed down from generations. And
the best way to do it.
It is. But he, however, was a little bit, maybe a little bit older than Phish's age bracket, I guess, and was never really into Phish. So that was kind of a blind spot for me. And as everyone listening to this is well familiar, that Phish is a very daunting catalog to try and kind of like penetrate as somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. So I never really took the plunge. I was very consumed with the Dead and with all my other various music that I'm into, and didn't really take the plunge until the pandemic. And I actually got inspired by another podcast, 36 from the Vault. They did their episode about the Island tour. And I was like, I have to check this out, and I did. And
I love 36 from the Vault, by the way.
It's great.
I had Rob on in November. If there are any fans of 36 from the Vault listening to this who haven't heard that episode, we talked about Simple, and it's awesome. So check that out.
Yeah. Rob is great, and another kind of another guide on my initial journey. He has kind of a doc that circulates of some of his like key shows and stuff. Definitely skewed toward 1.0. So that was kind of my entry point, and I got, just really into that. And then, as things kind of unfolded, I ended up kind of dovetailing with work. I ended up doing some reporting about the Beacon Jams, and that like sent me further down the rabbit hole and started getting really into Tab. And so it's been interesting, I guess, like basically 2 years of kind of doing the Phish deep dive, and I finally kind of feel like I have a handle on it. So, but yeah, no, it's been really fun, and definitely has, as I'm sure people, it has set me off on other, I've gotten really into Zappa over the last year, largely inspired by Trey's Zappa influence and stuff. So yeah, it's been a really fun experience, and it's been really cool.
Amazing. It is cool because I think you're like one of my first guests that I've had on here who is like a recent Phish convert. Most of the people are like, oh, I saw them in the 90s, or I got into them in high school, or, so it's cool to get a more recent, someone who's gotten into them more recent perspective, not a recent perspective, because that's all of us, or me, my bias. But anyway,
I remember when I'm a huge Deadhead, and so I remember watching the Fairly Well shows, and that was really probably the first time that I had like actually sustained listen to Trey, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool, but like I don't really know anything about Phish, and Phish definitely has kind of a certain reputation, and and which I now think is inaccurate, but yeah. So that that was kind of my first exposure, but then
the and from there was it Phish that led you to other jam bands like Goose, or was that your Dead influence that helped that, or both?
That was all kind of I would say like all kind of concurrent. Yeah, I kind of my big, because my whole thing like for several years was I would tell people, I'm into the Dead, I'm not into jam bands. Like and
pretentious.
and I don't know, like it just kind of it all kind of happened kind of concurrently, that I was getting Phish and getting Billy Strings and Goose and kind of that whole world, and it just as you well know, you start listening to one thing and it's like, oh well, like oh, well, those people played with these people, and this is from
Right.
that, and it just all kind of, it's like you get down the rabbit hole. So
Yeah,
everybody has so many
most of the way I discover new music is like if Trey covers a song, or like
Mhm.
some band I like covers a song, and then I'm like, oh, like that's a good song. I should listen to more stuff by that artist. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an absolutely endless rabbit hole with so many different paths to go down. It's amazing.
And it was
Absolutely,
very weird
so
getting
much.
into all these bands that are like extremely live based and
Yeah.
getting into it during you can't see any live music. So now I'm like in this thing of like, I saw two of Trey's solo acoustic shows in at the Beacon. I have the poster right here.
In June,
I
yeah.
saw two of his acoustic shows at the Beacon, and I saw him do his two Radio City shows, and then like in this fall I saw Goose do two. I saw Goose do their show at one of their shows at Terminal 5 here in New York, and
Right.
that was
See,
amazing.
you at least you have the advantage of you got into the bands over the pandemic, but you live in New York, which means it's very easy for you to see the artists. I got into Goose in February 2020, and I still haven't been able to see them because I'm stuck in Canada. So
Yeah,
March.
yeah,
Have you seen
yeah.
Phish yet? Were you able to catch them this year?
No, I
Or
was
last
going to
year?
go to the garden shows.
Ah,
My dad was going to fly out, and I've kind of gotten him into Phish a little bit over the last couple of years, and we were
nice.
going to go to him, and alas,
Well, will I see you in April?
wait. You will, yeah.
All right.
I'm going to all of them, and it's gonna be good. Yeah.
Awesome. It's gonna be my first time at MSG, so I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, the thing that everybody always talks about when you talk to them about it is how you're up so high off the ground technically, because it's like on the 5th floor or something, that like you can feel it start to kind of shake a little bit when it gets really energetic in there. So it's gonna be a good time.
I'm excited. So let's get into the song that you
Cool.
picked, which is Sand. What made you pick Sand?
It just is really just I increasingly gravitate toward the that 99 kind of, some of the ambient jamming and stuff they were doing, and Sand's really cool for that. And also my context on Sand specifically, I learned a lot about the song working on Alive Again, just because that was such an important kind of moment for Trey with Tony and Russ in forming the Tap Trio, and kind of that was one of the first originals that they did there. So and it just has always kind of fascinated me listening to how this song that was kind of initially done with the trio, that then it's really interesting to hear how Page fits in when they do it with Phish, and obviously also really interesting hearing how it kind of evolved in the 3.0 era. And I want to talk about that. Definitely, these are I picked a 99 version, and your version from 3.0 is definitely like there's a lot. It's very interesting as well.
Yeah,
so,
they're
in a very different way.
They're very different vibes. Like you picked 12,
Yep.
16, 99, which I love that one, but that's 20 minutes of straight Type 1 Sand. I picked and very ambient, kind of relaxed and hypnotic. And then I picked the Halloween 2014 one, which is very it's a lot more aggressive. I think there's a lot more going on. And it also has like one of my favorite segues into Twee Prize. Like that segue is incredible. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about 12, 16, 99 first. This show is amazing. December 99 is an incredible month. And fall 99 too. One of my favorite Phish jams of all time, the Boise Bag, also fall 99.
Yep.
But this show also has that incredible tweezer. But yeah, this set is just it's a perfect example of what makes fall 99 so awesome. Yeah. And the Sand is like, again, very fall 99. It's just 20 minutes of holding down that groove. Mike and Fishman just sticking to it. Like Mike doesn't vary from the Sand bass line at all for 20 minutes, which is crazy. Like I feel like by like 4 minutes in, he was just kind of zoned out and just going like thinking about what he's gonna have for lunch tomorrow. You know, like I can't imagine doing that for 20 minutes straight, and being engaged with it unless my name was Tony Markellis.
Yep.
You know, I wonder if, I mean, I'm going to let you talk about your pick in a minute, but like I was thinking about this when I was listening to this earlier. I wonder if when they debuted it with Phish in 99, I wonder if Trey like specifically told them like, I want to do this like I did it with Tab. Like, you're going to play this bass line the entire time and there's no switching it up. Or I wonder if Mike decided that on his own, you know, that he was going to stick to that. Because, you know, for these 1.0 sands in 99, like, that's what he does. Obviously, now he varies it very much. Like in the Halloween 2014 one, barely a minute into the jam, Mike's already, you know, switching up the bass line.
That was one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I know we'll get to your pick in a sec, but, you know, that was one of the things I enjoyed listening to the Halloween 2014 sand was just, Mike is like, just like, what's up, guys? He's like, you know, he's doing his thing, and that's cool. But yeah, this 12/16/99 one, that's definitely just what I really enjoyed. It's just how it is a zone, it's a vibe. I feel like I was listening to it. It's really cold in New York right now, and I was listening to it on a walk last night. It was dark, and it was like, I felt like I was kind of on the moon. Like, that's kind of the vibe I felt like from that jam, you know. Versus definitely the the Halloween one is definitely has a more kind of forward motion in terms of versus the 12/16 one is so much like every minute they're kind of like add in just a little another texture, and it just is ever so slightly changing.
Right, yeah, and to me, the 12/16/99 sand is like, you know, if you watch like one of those movies where they're like, you know, they walk into a room and it's like a bunch of hippies smoking weed. It's like that jam is what's playing. You know, it's like that very stereotypical, like, oh, that's your weed music. What's interesting to me as well is Trey doesn't play guitar until almost 12 minutes in.
Yeah.
After, you know, once the jam starts. Like, he doesn't touch his guitar from like 5.5 minutes until 12 minutes. Like, he's just dicking around on his keyboard. And I don't know how many people know, you know, Trey had his mini keyboard in 1999. That's where a lot of those twinkly ambient sounds that you hear in jams came from. And he also had, you know, he has his boomerang delay pedal, which is like longtime staple of his rig, but he had a second one in the rig in 99 for use with the keyboard. So he would just layer all of these different loops, you know, around just before 6 minutes. He puts that twinkly thing that, to me, I connect with the end of the Boise Bag. And they're just all of these like very familiar kind of sounds that you hear all throughout that year that he just layers one on top of the other in this jam, and they're just going in. Very prevalent for the first half of the jam, and then Trey turns down the volume a bit, and they're kind of in the background, so you don't hear them as much when you get that, you know, more intense bit at the end. But then when they drop back into the sand groove at the end, by then, when I was listening, I had like kind of forgotten about the loops, and then as soon as they drop back in, you can hear them immediately. I thought that was really, really cool.
I almost was like, it's like, when they get back into the like main kind of sand motif at the very end, like, but then obviously with some of that loop stuff like hanging around and stuff, I was like, it's almost like you've seen some stuff, like you came from, you've been through it, and now we're back, but there's like just you're a little bit different, so yeah.
Yeah, I describe it at one point as a cosmic space cloud.
Yep.
It
exactly
feels to me like it's a really interesting juxtaposition, because in a lot of Space Jams, especially now, all four of them are in on the Space Jam stuff. Like, they're all doing crazy alien things, something like the Deer Creek Simple.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing crazy stuff, and it's awesome. But in this, it feels to me like, like a giant like fog bank or a giant cloud descending on like a city or something. And the city is like, Mike and Fishman, like very grounded and like stable and consistent. And then you just have this like weird space cloud of synth and effects and stuff that Trey and Paige are putting down. I just, it's you get that kind of imagery when you listen to this.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a really interesting point, and kind of one. I mean, the big difference between the our two kind of picks here is how the rhythm section figures in, and think like, yeah, it's pretty cool hearing them hold it down for so long. Like, that just is kind of that's commendable, but then it also is interesting in the Halloween 2014 one, hearing them kind of mix it up a little bit. But also, I mean, I did have like a little note, like kind of like, I guess, during once Trey switched to guitar, you do hear like Phish switching up some of the rhythm a little bit, but ever so slightly. You notice it when he does, but definitely it's staying pretty consistent.
Yeah, and this kind of jam has really grown on me, mostly over the past year, I think. Obviously I still prefer modern Phish to 90s Phish, but there's less of a gap than there used to be. Like, I used to look at these long type 1 jams from like even 97, 99, like these just like a long funk groove or a long ambient groove. It's like, okay, like I'll take 3-4 minutes of this, but 20 minutes is unnecessary. Like, the first time I heard the Big Cypress Sand, I was like, what's the incentive to listen to 22 minutes of a sand groove? And now I'm listening on a deeper level now, I think, and I'm more appreciating the different layers of what's happening. And so, while again, I still prefer this sand from 2014 that has more going on, I've gained a new appreciation for these long ambient ones, I think.
Well, it's interesting because, like kind of my own listening habits over the course of the pandemic, I got, besides Phish, I got kind of really started listening to like a lot more ambient music, I think, because things are like so crazy in the world right now that it's like I need a little bit of kind of calm, and I got like really into like ambient country and like weird like kind of like steel guitar ambient noodly stuff, and so definitely like I mean, you mentioned the Boise Bag, and I love that one as well, where they'll just kind of like be out there vibing, and it just is, the textures are really really interesting.
Yeah. So before we keep going, question: if you had to pick a favorite Phish jam, I'm curious again your perspective that you've been into them for just under 2 years at this point. Like,
God,
what would that be for you?
I don't know. I mean, the big one that really was like, so like my first shows I really listened to were the Island tour, but then the one that really like broke it open was listening to the Amsterdam set. Amsterdam, all those Amsterdam 97 shows.
Would it have been the February or the July?
I forget if it
was very different.
Yeah. It's whichever one had. I think it's the February one with Down with Disease and the first Carini.
And the Carini, yeah.
Yeah, that was the jam that really broke it open for me, and I was like, whoa, like, because I remember, I mean, again, like Stephen Hyden and Rob Mitchum are both like, people who I really, respect their opinions, and when Stephen Hyden kind of was like, yeah, they almost get like Sonic Youthy, it was like, whoa, I did not know that Phish sounded like this, and so That was very cool.
Yeah, winter '97, that Europe tour is like a really cool transitional tour, because you have they're going from that, they're kind of starting towards the funk of '97, but they're not quite there yet. And so there's there's a lot of different things going on. Yeah, that Amsterdam show is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about my pick, which is the Halloween 2014 Sand. This one, again, as we've mentioned, a lot more aggressive. All four band members are a lot more assertive. Like the 12, 16, 99 Sand, they all could have hit a bowl off stage before it and then gone on and been in this like dreamlike state. This one, they definitely didn't, regardless of the fact that, they don't do drugs anymore or whatever. But like, that it's a lot more hard charging, and especially because it's the end of the third set of a Halloween show, which normally by this point, you're either getting a bunch of songs or a few short jams. But like throwing this like 18-minute Sand that has like this crazy fiery energy to it towards the end of the third set is really cool in that context, not just, with how good the jam is. You've got this great Type 1 section at the beginning that, Trey rips. I think Page really shines in the second half on clav.
I was blown away listening to Page on this. I mean, you just talk about like, he just like perfectly reinforcing when it's appropriate, but also like really like leading, changing things. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, I described his playing as saucy around 10 minutes and 45 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, just to, stop you for a sec, I thought that was very interesting that you made the note about because I was thinking about this too, about the placement within the shows in terms of the 12-16 one. It kicks off the second set, and versus this one is like, yeah, as you said, toward almost the very end of this just like marathon, a 3-set show. So yeah, I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, and I really like that, that nasty riff that they get in around 13 minutes. Like, the stop-start jamming, woos notwithstanding, there are some clav breaks in there. Trey just gets absolutely filthy. Mike's doing some awesome envelope filter stuff. Like, it's just, and Phish is just pushing the whole thing as he does. As a tour, when I was listening to Phish, in the fall of 2014, I was listening to a bunch of the shows, and that was the first time that I, as a 14-year-old at the time, kind of had the thought, like, maybe that's it. Like, maybe they're past their prime. Like, I know there was a lot of slop from Trey on this tour. He maybe wasn't playing as well as in 2013, or, obviously not playing as well as in the 90s. And I think I've mentioned this on a few prior episodes, but that was really like a moment for me where I was kind of like, okay, like, maybe we're on the other side of the mountain. And then, they throw out a jam like this, and there are obviously a few other awesome standout jams from fall 2014. But I would say, it's not a very talked about tour in terms of 3.0. 2014 as a whole was kind of an uneven year, I think. You have stuff like Randall's. You have those massive Fuegos from earlier in the summer. Dick's was great, as it was, that amazing Simple. But you've got, the Fuego songs making their ways into second sets, and The Line is everywhere, and Devotion to a Dream, and, these songs that people don't like as much. And so I think, in the context of the year, this is a really, really cool jam.
Yeah.
I think. And
I think it's very interesting looking at kind of also because, the beginning, the vocal part of Sand always, there isn't a ton of variation. But then hearing how, like, in the 99 one, Trey is just like the second that the vocal part ends, he's like, I'm going over to the little keyboard thing. I'm going to do that. And then, but then on the 2014 one, how he just is like immediately like, yeah, let's go in, let's start soloing, let's start doing that thing. And it's very melodic and pushing it forward and stuff. And that was really interesting for me here, because that is totally not a flavor that you get with the, like, a lot of the 99 ones where they're getting more ambient.
Yeah.
When you're hearing, in the 2014 ones, like, I'm going to do like a full solo right now. I'm going to start jamming immediately. And that was cool.
Yeah. And so are you pro woo or are you anti woo?
I think I'm anti woo. I did not enjoy that part so much, but that's kind of one of the things where it's like being there is the differentiating factor, I feel like.
Right.
So.
I see. I'm pro woo because Trey loves it so much. I think watching him when the crowd woos is awesome because he loves it and has this huge grin on his face always. And it's fun to do it when you're at the show.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't belong in Vultures, but when they do it during jams, sometimes it's cool. Obviously there are two different woo sections in the Sand. One of them during that like School's Out jam at the end. I love that. And
it's fun.
Kind of the way that it goes from that like really driving funk groove with like the strong clav and the repeating riff they keep doing that like Trey finds earlier in the jam, and then Mike plays it at the bass line for a while, and then they all jump on it before it transitions to School's Out. Like there's so much great interplay happening in this one.
Yeah, it feels it's evolving very organically, and everybody's contributing to it, and that's really enjoyable. And I love, Page's clav work is pretty awesome. The degree of the funk, and just he's got these like dirty tones, and it just is like,
his clav tone in early 3.0 up until I think it changed a little bit in 2015, I think, but like especially 2013, 2014, it's just like it's so good. And I haven't totally figured out. I mean, I've only played actual clav a few times in my life, but I haven't totally figured out how he gets that kind of feedback on the clav. It's like normally with a guitar, you can get feedback when you move around, or you can, your position to the amp. But Page isn't moving the clav, in relation to the amp. Like he just has the keys. So I've always wondered how he does that. If anybody knows, please let me know. Tweet me something. Just tell me, because I've it's been like a decade now, and I've not been able to figure out how he does that. But yeah, there's a lot of that. There's like that cool delay dissonance part. I think I started talking about that earlier, and then my train of thought went elsewhere, which happens all the time. But there's that like cool weird delay section until Trey like finds that like schools out jam idea and pushes them in that direction. But there's a cool where they're all just kind of swirling around. I mean, and that's the closest we get to kind of that ambient fog haze of the other jam. It's still pretty far from that, but that's the closest we kind of get to it, I think.
Well, and this is the interesting thing of where it's like, okay, so when I come to a sand, I'm kind of looking for that more, I'm looking for kind of a darker vibe, like I'm looking for that kind of dark, angsty vibe. And it's interesting because in the Big Cypress set, when they go into Quadraphonic, it's like, so, it kind of goes in the direction that I'm wanting it to go, versus even in the 12/16/99 one. I mean, it is a hard stop before they go into the next one, but they go into Mango Song. It just kind of ooh, that's kind of like not quite my my vibe I'm going for right now. And so it's kind of like this. That's where it's interesting, where the sequencing in this Halloween show comes into play, because it's like it makes sense that like if you're there, you're like at the end of set 3, you're ready for the big finale. You're having fun. Your buzz, if you're into that, is like as much as it's going to be for the night and stuff. And so and they're about to go into Twee Prize, so it makes sense that then they're like, all right, we're going to do this fun little schools out tease. We're going to do the woo thing, and then we're going to send it off to the big finale. But that just made me like, I was really on board with this one kind of until we got into a little bit of the wooing, and then I was like, I don't know. But then the transition into the Twee Prize is great. So
and I'm going to come back to your point earlier, but the transition into Twee Prize is awesome, because it's like a full 30 seconds of just like, Trey kind of like starts teasing the riff, and then he just starts fully playing the Twee Prize riff, and they're just going, and like you can just tell the band's just like, like we found it. I'm sure they were planning. They obviously were They were planning on ending the set or show with Twee Prize regardless. But it's cool the way that they organically found it instead of hard stopping it out of sand. And if you listen to the beginning of the Twee Prize track, I don't know if you did that after the sand, but there's just the way that they get into it, and they kind of like all drop out one by one, leaving Trey to start the song properly. And I just think it's a really cool segue, especially for a year like 2014, where you don't see a lot of smooth segues like that into songs that work in good placements. You get a lot of rip chords and mid-second set the line, and lots of lovely things like that thankfully we don't see that much of anymore. But yeah, back to your earlier point of you liking the darker vibe of Sand. It's interesting to look at the changing of Sand's role in a show, from 99 to the modern era. It back then it was these big 20-minute. Basically, it was like a playground for Trey, and Page too. But I think mostly for Trey, he used Sand as an opportunity to just kind of experiment on his keyboard and just dick around with his effects and see what he could do over this kind of like blank canvas. The same way as 2001 is kind of this blank canvas to do that. He just, it's a similar kind of thing where it's a consistent groove. There's no chord changes to anticipate. Obviously, 2001 has the chorus and that stuff, but he's the one that cues it. So he can take as long as he wants to do whatever he wants with his effects. And so, obviously his effects palette is very different now than it was then, but he's really using this as an opportunity to experiment. And you can hear he's just layering different things. It sounds like he's playing like a steel pan drum patch on the synthesizer at one point. And this is later in the year, like, he's already had the keyboard for a full year, but he's still, there's a difference between using it in, say, like a deep jam and a chalk dust versus a type 1 sand jam. Again, it's that blank canvas. But then now, looking at how sand works in the modern era, kind of, excluding some jams like this Vegas one and 2021, I will exclude as well. But it was mostly, and obviously there are a few others like Dick's 2012. But a lot of the time, sand was this type 1 rager, and especially in like 2017 to 19, it was really this set closer or mid-set energy boost. Like, wasn't really doing anything that you wouldn't expect. Like, it was very much, they're playing it, great, you can expect a really fiery peak, and then the set's going to be over, or, just keep the energy high. Like, it's nice that we're now back at a point where, when they start playing sand, like, there's a good chance that it's going to modulate out of the song, and they're going to, because I will admit, like, listening to sand, it's not the easiest groove to break out of, because of how locked in the rhythm section is, and because of how steady it is. Like, a lot of songs, it's definitely easier to get type 2 on. But sand is one where the groove is already, there. It's hard to describe, but like, you know what I mean.
Well, this is something that Trey talked about when we talked to him for Alive Again, and talking about writing Sand and First Tube kind of like on the same day with Tony and Russ, and how like the objective was, we want to, these songs are just like this very elemental, hypnotic, like groove that just you can lock into, and that it's like it's so reliable that somebody could be dancing and grooving to it, and that there isn't, so much of a signature of Phish is we're going to be messing with song structures, we're going to be switching up rhythms and time signatures and all that, and this is not that. This is just like, we're giving you this rhythm, and then as you can either, it both is a consistency for the audience, and then, as you said, a playground for Trey to do whatever he wants over this very kind of bedrock vibe. And that's another reason why it's interesting listening to 2014 and other 3.0 Sands, because they've now kind of shed that, where they can mess around with it a little bit more than they might have, at least as a full band.
Yeah, and it's interesting mentioning the way I'd forgotten about. Was that in the Alive Again podcast? It's been,
I think it was,
a long time since I listened to it.
Yeah.
But so that specific detail about writing it with the intent of it being this kind of, consistent groove thing, then that probably answers my earlier question about, whether Trey, basically told Mike and Phish, like, you stick with this, you don't change it up to keep with that vibe. Because I think, by 2014, obviously, the band is a much more democratic, playing music-wise. Like, in 1999, Page was still just starting to step out more, but it's still very much, we go where Trey says. And in 2014, they've already had, well, besides the fact that it's 15 years later, they've gone through, the hiatus, they've gone through 2.0, they've gone through the breakup, and they've had this rebirth where they've, had this more democratic style of jamming, especially in 2014. I remember in that year, Trey was purposely trying to play more rhythm guitar. After kind of the highlight of fall 2013 and, his playing in 2011 or 2010 through 2012 was also fantastic. But he kind of, I remember, I don't know if I read it, whether it was an interview with him or something, but I remember back then reading like Trey has focused on taking a step back and letting the other band members, step forward more and in a different way than he did that in, say, 97. Because in 97, he's playing a lot of rhythm guitar. He's playing, these funk grooves, but he still has these crazy, Hendrix-like solos where he just kind of pulls the jam wherever he wants and like creates this cloud of dissonant guitar noise and craziness. But in 2014, like he's really, he's just playing a lot more rhythm guitar. Like in this jam, after his initial Type 1 solo, he's playing some really fantastic rhythm stuff as it kind of transitions into that more hard charging, more stanky, for lack of a better term.
Groove. Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think if there's other highlights in this, but yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Sorry.
It speaks to also his transition from his playing style in like 97 to 99. Like if Sand had existed in 1997, it would have come out very different. Not just because he didn't have the keyboard then, but because he was playing guitar very differently. Like in 99, his dissonant solos aren't as angry. I think they've got that reverse delay, which is present towards the end of this Sand. But they've got that kind of, like kind of quality to it, like you're going through a wormhole. And I think there's less of the whammy, which is, again, characteristic of Trey's playing in general, but a lot of those solos in 97. It's just, even over the span of 2 years, they were undergoing so much change as a band at the time. And, with the new material and new gear and stuff, they're really, trying to reinvent themselves as well. They nailed the funk in 97, and then they started moving a bit more into ambient stuff in 98. You really see, the Island Tour, being like the last of the fall 97 funk sounds of like the, you have a lot of the jams end up funk groove, crazy Trey, screaming peak craziness, funk groove, where you move into a more cohesive version of that, which, is why I'm not as hot on fall 97 as a lot of people, because there's a lot of those moments, like in the 11-19 Wolfmans is one that comes to mind. I talk about that on episode 5 of this podcast, where there's just these couple of moments where, the jam seems to be going somewhere, and then Trey gets bored or decides he wants it to go somewhere else, and just like brute force crazy guitar stuff into this different kind of jam, and that's why, like, I'll always prefer summer 97 over fall 97, because you've got that more, like, they're more together.
I do think I might like summer 97 more than fall 97. Is summer 97 the one with the with that like really cool ghost in
Lakewood Ghost?
I think. Yeah, that one's awesome. That's awesome. I love
that's
that.
it. Yeah. That's also one of my top 5 Phish jams ever.
That's a great one.
I only know 3 of my top 5 Phish jams ever off the top of my head, because I can't decide, but I know Baker's Dozen, Chalk Dust, Lakewood Ghost, and Boise Bag.
All right.
So there you go, all you people who criticize me for not liking 1.0 enough. I've got 2 1.0 jams in my top 5.
You respect the history.
I never, don't respect the history. It's just, I've got a more unpopular opinion, obviously, but I prefer the way they're doing now. Like 2021 is currently my favorite year of Phish. And I always say, like, I've always said that Phish is the best it's ever been, but I've only been right for like the last 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's interesting, and you experience this being on, like me, on the younger side of things, and like talking to people who it's always like, like my dad, huge Deadhead, and talking to him about like being at the closing of Winterland, 12/31/78, and it's
that's awesome.
like what the heck, dude? And it's like so, but it's like interesting though, because like people who lived it have a different perspective than people who kind of came to it with like, okay, like I wasn't living it, and I can look at it with like maybe a little bit more objectivity and kind of be like, okay, like this is the problems I have with that or whatever, So it's definitely, not to get too philosophical here, but
Right. But like,
definitely,
yeah, 20 years from now, people are going to be like, wow, Phish is playing way better in their, in their late 70s than they were in their late 50s. Like, because
yeah,
we know they'll still be playing,
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, like, it's a different perspective because, yeah, you do get, a different perspective on it when you listen to it 25 years later versus listening to it at the show or having the experience of collecting the tapes that, everyone had back in the 90s. We have the luxury of being able to pull up any show we want at a moment's notice. But yeah, it's a different perspective, having we're lucky that this 12/16/99 show has the archival release, and it's one of those shows from the 90s that has that, there are some, they all sound great, but there are some that just have that, how this one sounds, like the soundboard just has that depth to it. Fishman's kit just sounds incredible. Everything just has such definition as to, as opposed to, like, for example, I'm just going to pick Fall 97 because those shows have a very different, I don't know if these were recorded on like a 16 track versus a 2 track or whatever, but it just has such a bright and full sound to me that I'm very grateful that I get to listen to it that way.
Yeah, definitely, with Dead stuff and Phish stuff, it's easy to feel a little bit spoiled, like, if people from, older generations be like, I had to work for those tapes. I really cherished it. And it was, it was like a 5th generation tape and it sounded like crap, but boy, did I love it, and,
Right.
and, you kids with your archive and stuff. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's it's amazing what an age we live in that we're also able to, watch all the shows live. Like it's awesome.
Yeah.
And like that's definitely something that, we take for granted. Like the fact that if a show isn't webcasted, we like complain and then be like, we need a Mixlr, like somebody better be streaming it. Like, back then you couldn't even see the set list, until later in the 90s. Like it's just, it's all about perspective, and it's yeah, it's just it's hard to see it from the other perspective when I'm 21 years old and I've never experienced anything other than shows being available immediately after, being able to webcast basically anything, and I think that's why I'm a bit more of a jaded Goose fan than a lot of people, because I've never seen a show, so there's no jam that's like, whoa, I was there and it was amazing. Like it's all just like, not that say that I'm like I feel like my point seems like it's coming out weird, but like, it's just, you have that different perspective listening back to a lot more than you've seen live. Or
Yeah. And it's definitely, it's a fascinating experience for sure. I mean, I remember, and I'm a few years older than you, so I kind of remember when the live stream, like I remember sitting in my dorm room during freshman year of college, so sort of in spring 2011. And I remember watching LCD Sound System's farewell show, farewell in air quotes, farewell show from the garden, and it was live streaming, a video live stream, and I was just like, we live in the future, like it was back when that was not, and now it is a really cool, lucky thing to be able to couch tour and everything. And that was a fascinating thing when concerts shut down at the beginning of the pandemic. Was like, it had, other than some high profile examples, been largely kind of a jam band thing. And that then, other people were like, whoa, you can like watch concerts in your home. This is awesome. And
Right.
so, yeah, it's been a fascinating
thing. And the pandemic created that environment to make it feasible for other artists to live stream. Like a lot of the time, like, I'm not going to pay $200 to watch live streams of every webcast on like, a Drake tour.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Drake, but if I was, every show's pretty much the same. He's touring in support of an album, so he's playing songs from that album. And so even as like a hardcore Drake fan, like maybe you want to watch every show, but like probably not. Meanwhile, to me, like Goose Winter Tour starts next week. My wallet is ready to drop $200 on the webcast pass, and like it's significantly more for me too because of the exchange rate. But I'm just like, it's like I can't not do it. What am I gonna not watch all the shows? Like it's,
and it feeds on it because they know that people are watching and that they have to be, more than they even would anyway. They have to be, locked in every night and doing creative things every night, and
and and then you add that extra element to it, which is like, the social media aspect, like live tweeting a show is so much fun. Obviously more people live tweet a Phish show than live tweet a Goose show, but like, when Phish is on tour and, we're all on Twitter and we're all either webcasting or people are posting from at the show, like, and everyone's just like, my whole feed is freaking out about the same thing. And like, when people post one of those screenshots where it's like 3 people tweet like the exact same thing, freaking out about the show within like 10 seconds of each other, it's just awesome.
I mean, doing that with both this is archival stuff, but the dinner and the movie stuff, and then also the Dead shakedown streams that they were doing like early pandemic days. Yeah. That was like a lifeline of like, all right, we can just all make crack jokes about Jerry's ponytail. It's all going to be okay, guys. Like,
right.
So
and with the Dead, there's an even, the different perspectives has so many more different generations than the Phish ones do. Like your dad has such a different perspective than, my dad, even because your dad saw them in the 70s. My dad saw the Dead for the first time in 87. So,
and my dad was late to it because he was, he was a kid when they were doing the acid tests and stuff. So he didn't,
exactly.
He was already late to the party, and he's a big, like, he loves Jerry Garcia band because that was like really starting up when he was like, late teens, and that was like what he really had a connection to and stuff. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And then, 20 years from now, there will be people cheering for a bust out of the line,
So it's coming. It's coming.
It's like the same people who want Dead and Company to play like Keep Your Day Job, like just for fun. Yeah. Like, it's
hit the Brent stuff.
You want a song that's just like, they don't play just because they don't play it. No, that's kind of a but yeah, it's all about perspective. And going back to the music that we were talking about, it was a good tangent. I'm always, when I go into an episode, I'm like, I wonder what the tangent's going to be in the second half of the episode this time. And so, I really enjoyed that one. That was
we got thoughts. We got thoughts about generational stuff and liking these bands where people can be a little bit territorial and impassioned, I would say, about their kind of the era that they have a connection to.
Definitely. I do want to mention one more thing about these two versions of Sand. Kind of contrary to what you'd normally expect from a 90s jam versus a modern era jam, there's been, I guess 2014 not as much, but there's been, in recent years, there's been a lot more synths and electric piano and stuff in the jam, where a lot of the stuff in the 90s had more clav and piano and organ to it, a more grounded kind of acoustic instruments, I guess, versus like synthesizers. And it's kind of the opposite here, which I guess, 99's kind of an outlier. Their 98, 99 were really more of that synthy sound, as opposed to, like there was a lot of synth in 97, but there was still the heavy clav and piano and things like that. But, you have, there's no synth in the 2014 Sand, whereas now if they play anything, really, you're guaranteed to hear some synth.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Page is doing some really, really cool and really subtle stuff on his Yamaha CS60, which is the big one that he plays Meat Stick on.
Yeah.
He's doing some really, really cool stuff in this 12/16/99 Sand. It's just like in the first half when Trey is also on the keyboard and they're making that cosmic cloud,
Yeah. I mean, just like keeps doing these little layers, these little permutations, these kind of little things changing that, I find that kind of subtlety. I definitely understand the case of somebody saying like, I want something a little more going on. I definitely get that. And that's, I thought the 1031 14 one was really interesting for that reason, because they're moving through stuff, they're doing things, they're and that's really fun as well. But I mean, just two very different flavors on the same song. So
yeah,
that's what we do.
and that's the beauty of it. There's a version for every mood that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to wrap up the episode.
Right.
Thank you so much, Eric, for being on today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for those of you interested, if you're still listening, later this week, we've got a very special episode coming out about the Phish Jam of the Year 2021 bracket that just debuted over at Phish.net. Really excited about this one. It's a really cool bracket. I've got a couple of great guests coming on. So look out for that around Wednesday, I'm going to say, but don't hold me to that. But yeah, so thank you all so much for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.